Rima Basharnitsan, the founder and CEO of Dialogue. Welcome to 10 by 20, a series of 10 questions discussed in 20-minute dialogues with local and international leaders doing visionary work at the intersection of people, technology, and society. Welcome back to 10 by 20. Today we have Kim MacPherson, who is the Executive Director of Health Management at the Haas School of Business. She's part of the faculty at the UC School of Public Health and also the co-director for the Berkeley Center of Health Technology. Kim's got over 30 years of health industry experience, which spans leadership roles in operations, management consulting, and strategic business planning and product development. And in addition to her work at UC Berkeley, she's also the board chair for St. Francis Memorial Hospital. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So excited to have you. So as you know, we'll do 10, this is a 10 by 20. So we'll do 10 questions, 20 minutes. And so we always like to start off about how what you do now was influenced by how you grew up. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's such interesting to look back and think about those influences. The one that I kind of zeroed in on was my grandfather. I grew up in a tight-knit family, and my grandfather was a Jungian analyst, and it was really important to him that we think about our lives in many dimensions. And he brought this sort of interesting mix, which I feel really guides me today, which is the sense of evidence-driven, empirical kind of approach to being thoughtful about something, but also making sure that you're experiencing life and thinking about things in a holistic manner. So in the household, it was this combination of self-examination and thinking about, your dreams and how you're reacting to things, but also full of art and like looking at mythology and being kind of balanced in that things can happen from, a self-awareness perspective, but also more broadly. And so I just think that that really influenced where I ended up, which is in this sort of world where I think empirical, evidence-driven sort of rigor is key. And I'm at UC Berkeley, top-rated public university from a research and teaching lens. But I also sit in a place like public health where I want to see people as they want to be seen. And I want to think about what affects them and what changes them in a very holistic manner. And so I think the years of being asked at the breakfast table about my dreams, or, asking, well, what do you think about that painting on the wall? How does that make you feel? What does that make you think about? Paired with sort of a rigorous academic background probably has a lot to do with where I sit today and what influences sort of the choices that I make and probably how I just express myself to others. Oh,
that's awesome. It just made me think about some of the conversations I used to have at the dinner table with my parents. And sometimes I wondered, they were a lot of them so pragmatic to the day. I think it takes an extra level of insight to go deeper into your subconscious and then ask how does it to sort of bring out some of the things that are not necessarily visible to a kid and allow them to actually experience it consciously at the dinner table. So that's beautiful.
It was wonderful. And I do think it created a different bond that he and I had, which is probably why he was such a special, figure in my life. Obviously, parents are really close as well, but there was something about our dynamic and the way he spoke to me as an adult to a child. Even at that age, I didn't feel like I was being spoken at. We also used to play chess, and he always encouraged me to be able to think ahead and to be sort of thoughtful and strategic. And I teach strategy now. And so, when I look back about that, sort of that, you said that influence, currently, obviously a constellation, but I do think much of what guides me today was some of that foundational stuff that we did through conversation, gameplay. We also played poker, taught me how to bluff, different things. And I think he just thought those were life skills and he saw aptitude perhaps that I might be willing and able to uptake those lessons. And so then he just kept leaning in on them. And I deeply appreciate that gift of what we got to do together for all those years.
That's awesome. And how did you decide to go into academia? Because I know you were in management consulting before.
Yeah.
How did that transition go? Because a lot of times what I've noticed is academia is not for the faint of heart. It's a very specific place, and there's a very specific rules to be played as if you're there. And so I'm curious how that transitioned from the business world and why that happened.
Yeah, happy to share. And it wasn't planned. I think I get asked this question quite frequently, particularly as by say students who come and meet with me. How did you end up here? And how did that happen? And it wasn't planned. I graduated in the early 90s with an MBA and an MPH, actually the very same program I direct today at Berkeley. And I went into management consulting because I just couldn't pick any one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to do lots of things, which is probably a hallmark of where I still am. But life intervenes. I had two beautiful children, a couple years apart, and the lifestyle of being a management consultant and then being the kind of parent that I wanted to be, I couldn't solve that equation as much as I tried. And so I stepped back for 6 months after the birth of my daughter in 2005 and just sort of thought about what could I do that honors the parent I want to be, but allows me to still have impact. I didn't want a desk job, in the healthcare space at an insurance company again or somewhere. I wanted to do something that was perhaps more similar actually to my consulting environment that offered me, being around really intellectually curious people, getting paid to learn, solving problems and explaining things to people that need to know. And it just turned out that academia fit that bill. And so my old department in the School of Public Health and Health Policy Management was actually recruiting for a faculty person who had applied knowledge. I think one of the amazing things about the Berkeley campus, and I think other campuses may have this similar mindset, is that students need a mix actually of the academic pedigrees or the pedagogy that faculty bring forward. You absolutely need, research driven, what we call academic senate faculty, PhDs who are deeply steeped in creating new knowledge and then sharing that with students. But many students also need that pragmatic, practical, real world touch. And a lot of my colleagues who came up through the research ranks don't have as much time outside of academia. And so there is this intentional effort to hire what they call professional faculty, which is where I fit. And they can be people who teach one class on top of a very meaty day job, or people like me who lean in 100%. And we bring forward all of our industry and applied knowledge, and we teach classes where that is actually more valuable than being in the more theoretical camp. And so students in the programs that we have, they'll take a balance of that throughout their time with us in their curriculum, getting that great theory and getting a chance to understand where the research is going, but also getting to hear like, well, how did you actually do it when you were in management consulting or when you work for a health plan? And it's my job to help them really frame a point of view. I always tell them, like, I have a point of view, you will hear it, but it's not for you to adopt. It's for you to consider along with your own growing point of view. And on different topics, their point of view starts at different starting points. But my job is to sort of help them grow from wherever they're at and to kind of, poke at them to think about things and to incorporate things that they maybe haven't already. And these are really mature, intellectually sophisticated people in the room, just like, in management consulting. And again, my job is to nurture their growth at this exciting moment of their lives where they're investing personally, financially, academically to get to that next place. These are the future leaders in my space, and to be part of that journey is a privilege. I mean, having been a part of it back now to people who graduated, back in 2006, 2007, and to see the roles that they inhabit, the contributions they're making. Everyone's like, oh, you could have been the CEO of something or other. I'm like, I guess, but like, I wouldn't have a legacy of, cohort after cohort, almost 18 cohorts of graduate students who are out there living their lives, making this amazing, sort of amplified change in a space that I care deeply about. I don't know what better impact I could have had in my career, actually.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for yourself, when would you say that you do your most creative and innovative work?
Mm. I really like small group ideation, and I like to come to it with some prep, but I think this is again where that empirical evidence. I'm kind of a constant synthesizer of information. I get a lot of blasts. I spend a lot of time, looking at things, and I never really know exactly what's attached to me until I'm in conversation. I'm an external processor, so I
Yeah,
learn a lot in discoursing with others, even if whether it's
yeah.
about myself or whether it's about a topic. I don't need large group facilitation, but I think a small group, ideally interdisciplinary, is where the real
Mm.
fun for me happens, and I can jump in. I can moderate or facilitate those, but I'm lousy at it if I can't actually also participate as some out of a contributor. Really hard for me to sit in a moderator chair and hold back. Again, I moderate a lot at conferences, and I really have to rein myself in to not be a co-panelist if that's not what's being asked of me. But again, it's small group ideation,
Yeah.
and everybody comes intellectually jazzed and ready to like think about something. And And I think that's also really, it's a holdover from consulting as well, where that's a lot of how we problem solve. I like not knowing where the journey's going to go. I talk about
Mm,
this with students actually when they're thinking about career paths, and whether somebody appreciates certainty, likes working with known data, sees the beauty in working with data or numbers, but there's kind of an answer afoot. Uh,
mhm,
versus others who like that frisson of the unknown. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how we're going to get to a resolution, but I'm confident that we will. And I'm excited to go on the journey. And I think sometimes people are more comfortable in one or the other. And I like the hypothetical, and I like it in academia, and I really liked it in consulting. I didn't like cookie
mhm.
cutter projects where I was just
No.
executing, super not up my alley, even though those were efficient and well received and important to do, necessary, but not my most creative best work. I really like that. We don't know,
Yeah.
what's next. So.
Oh, everything you're saying resonates because I get excited by the same thing. Small group facilitation, really
Mhm.
ideation, and like allowing people. I also have a hard time when I facilitate not to be part of the
Yeah.
conversation in a way
It's
that's
like,
like a
let me in. Yeah,
participant. Totally.
sure.
Um, and would you say, I mean, a lot of I think there's, it's interesting to look at healthcare right now because I think there's like this part that's really real for us as people that are going through and experiencing challenges in the healthcare system.
Hmm.
And then there's this like theoretical sort of, oh yeah, that happens over there. I don't have impact
Hmm.
on it. It happens to almost like to me in some way where we as individuals don't necessarily have the opportunity to influence policy and process and operations within our providers. I'm curious, like when you are teaching and or even just as you're having these conversations with your both colleagues and students, how has the idea of human connection
Hmm.
been part of it? Because I know there's human centered design that's always been for the
Yeah.
past like decade, right? Like the buzzword from design thinking. But if we take that aside for a second and really look at the connection piece, how does that permeate what you're building right now?
I think it's super important. I do think that, human centered design aside, I think the healthcare system was never really designed for the people who needed it, right?
Mhm.
It gets driven by lots of other factors. In this country, it's largely a business. And so it's governed by not just policy, but market forces. And so I think that, yes, people have that experience of it happening to them. I really challenge students to find that way in which working with others, they can have the impact that they want to have. And that can be in a small startup where you're really, working in a small team
Mhm.
and coming up with something innovative and changing, or to go into one of the larger legacy organizations and find a group that's really trying to have an impact for a particular, population. So unburdening and reducing friction. I think a lot of the problem with healthcare is it's so opaque, it's so challenging to kind of root out, well, what lever would I even pull to make a change? And so we focus a lot on, what are those final 3 feet? I think that's where
Mhm.
academia gets in trouble. I can design all kinds of beautiful ways to fix the healthcare system, but they fall apart if you try to put them out there in the real world. So it's actually influenced my teaching a lot in terms of the things
Mhm.
that I talk about. I used to talk a lot about sort of value-based payment, this idea that don't
Mhm.
pay for volume, don't pay for more, pay for value. I
Yeah.
think as a construct that is spot on, but actually
Yeah.
putting that into practice is incredibly difficult. Even you and I may not agree on what would be value, or
Right.
exact value in the same sort of clinical interaction. And then if you bring a payer and a provider and a regulator and a government and
Yeah.
society into that, everyone's going to have a different value point. And so for me, the complexities of that, the friction and administrative cost of that has me pausing and going, are we solving the right problem? You can believe in something as a construct, but maybe we need to solve it differently. Maybe we need to go upstream or go downstream and get into that. Like, when I'm right in front of you, how do I then recognize what you need and I do that?
Mm. Yeah.
And so a lot of what you're seeing right now, which I find super interesting, are, say, primary care, and rather than having it puppet string pulled at sort of the top of the mechanisms of how you're paying that doctor or that provider, let's actually think about, well, what does somebody seeking primary care want? They want to be seen. They want a
Mhm.
trusted interaction. And now it's great. You're seeing, primary care for women from Maven and Tia, primary
Mhm.
care for someone who identifies as trans from Plume or Folks. Like, I think that
Mhm.
ability to have a more authentic and resonating experience in the moment, and then kind of back up from there, might be a better way than all of this top-down policy reimbursement driven, it doesn't seem to be penetrating into the day to day. And I think that a lot of people right now would just rather have like a great experience in that care moment with
Mhm.
whomever they're with, uh, and then worry about some of the rest of that later. I also think we're at grave danger of all of the burnout and the behavioral and mental health
Yeah.
injury really to the caregiving workforce. You can see people leaving the professions. And so I think that the centering on that moment of interaction and how do you amplify and make that as authentic and high impact as possible might cure that or aid that as well. Cure is a high bar, but aid that. I think that's what's been missing, people feeling like I'm able to give the care I want to give when I want to, and meet the need of the person in front of me. There's so much in the way. And
Yeah.
academics can get in the way. And policy wongs, we can think of all kinds of mechanisms, but I think we get too far away from the moment. So human centered design is a piece of it, but I think
Mhm.
it's almost more centering on the moment of human connectedness. And if
Yeah.
we stay there, and I don't even know that it needs a lot of fancy design. I think if it's an authentic, true moment and
Yeah.
you center back from that, maybe that's the way to go versus all this top down and, design, broader design upstream. We'll
Yeah.
find out. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
work going on there, and students are really excited. Empathy is a big thing. Equity is a big thing.
Yeah.
There's also this other sort of challenge is that almost everything in healthcare is cost increasing. All innovation just makes everything cost more usually, unlike
Mhm.
say tech and other places, pure
Mhm.
tech. And so then you get into this really important question of, well, then who gets it? Who's it
Mm.
affordable for, and
Hmm.
who's getting this differential experience where some people are having the best possible healthcare you could imagine, curative,
Mhm.
warm and fuzzy, and others can't get in the room.
Yeah.
To me, as a public health person, if I think about the intersection of where I want to see more energy happen and why I love directing this MBA MPH is because for
Mhm.
me, the tension there and how heartwarming it is to see how much students get that and care about that. We talk about this, like I said, we talked about cell and gene therapy yesterday in class, and it's like people are raising their hands, but what about people in Brazil? They can't get this, or what
Mhm.
about people in, rural Montana who don't live anywhere near a doctor who could even notice that they have a need?
Hmm.
So I think that the fact that the students really are clear that innovation that's just for a few isn't innovation really at all, or
Mhm.
not the kind of innovation that they want to get behind. So we love all the shiny new stuff, but what I really appreciate about the Berkeley ethos and what I'm seeing happening
Mhm.
elsewhere as well is this commitment to equity
Mhm.
and a broader appreciation of it's got to be affordable. We got to make it so everybody can get at it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that because I think there's I don't think enough people are making the differentiation between what you just said of the well, there's like the knowing who it's for and how everyone will get access. But then there's also like how do you create the interaction for
Hmm.
the type of conversation that's going to be a productive conversation for both,
Yeah,
right? And that's sort of and then how do you couple that with the burnout and the caregiving issue and all of that that's stemming from even pre-COVID in some ways. I think COVID exacerbated the burnout. And how
for
do we
sure.
handle all of
COVID.
that as we
Yeah.
trickle forward, really?
We
Um,
learned a lot in COVID, but yeah, I think there's a ways to go. But it is staying that in that authentic space. That's why I think your whole framing of human connectedness is so vital. Because if you
mm,
can hold yourself there and try to make sure that that is fostered in a really authentic way, then much of the rest of this, I think, begins to resolve itself.
yeah, yeah. Remember our humanity. That's kind of
Yeah,
the
100%.
constant, it seems like. Okay, are you ready for some rapid fire?
Okie doke. Yeah,
So we'll do this one, like one word or one sentence, however you feel most
sure.
compelled. So when do you feel most connected to others?
In dialogue. For
Mm.
sure. Yeah, I just, that conversation, connection in that way is probably, and that could, ideally in person, but I'm getting very used to conversation just like this, which I'm finding can also be highly rewarding. So
Yeah, even though we live basically like half an hour from each other, but it's fine.
I know, right? We could do this in person. Yes.
When and where are you happiest?
Hmm. I think it's in large gatherings with fluidity. Like I love live music. I really just
Mhm.
it feeds my soul to be with thousands of other people and kind of a communal experience. So particularly outdoors if I can get it. So the Greek Theater at Berkeley is a favorite of mine. Just being
Mhm.
out there in this singing space under an open sky, listening to a performer, with their art or performers, I think that that is where I'm just generally almost I can't imagine me in that setting and not being just feeling really happy and fulfilled.
Oh, beautiful. What intersection of disciplines are you most currently fascinated by?
I do think this can, where AI and sort of where some of this really advanced technology is going, and then back to like this human
Mhm.
connectedness. How do we deploy that as a force for good, an augmentative force? I don't see it as
Mm.
a substitute, but I can understand that there's a tension there, and there's just a desire to like bring in technology to solve challenges. But it's still a very humanistic world that I live in, the human interaction, the human touch, and so I'm actually teaching a class in clinical AI in the spring, and we're going to go right at this. Like, what are appropriate, viable, exciting ways to bring in this technology explosion in a way that augments and supports what we were talking about earlier, having a really
Mhm.
authentic, outcome to a clinical interaction. But we know there's a role for technology. We're just still, I think trying to
Yeah.
figure that out. So yeah, the tech and the human centeredness of healthcare is where I spend a lot of my thinking.
Hmm. Interesting. What is your greatest regret?
I move through things too quickly sometimes, and I don't experience the moment. I'm a fast thinker, a fast mover. I like a lot of different things, and so I fear sometimes that I don't slow down and always appreciate the moment. A key example is, college when I was in a rush to get out years ago in the 80s, and I didn't study abroad. A lot of things I probably didn't do in that moment. And now that I have children, one's a junior in college, one's a freshman, and they're exhibiting some of those same tendencies. Mom, we got to get out. It's so expensive. And I'm like, no, 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 don't do that. I did that, and so yeah, biggest regrets are when I've rushed through something too quickly, and some of those main tangible ones are in my youth. Moving through um, broader experiences and not appreciating sort of the side roads that I could have taken that would have been very enriching.
Mhm.
Also, just that I didn't focus more on learning multiple languages. I feel like kind
Hmm.
of an attractive American when I travel, and then I'm not very good outside of some basic French. I am married to someone who speaks six languages, and it's just a constant. I live in admiration of that. So those are probably they're related, but they're those are probably my biggest regrets. And I could still
Hmm.
fix the latter. I could still fix both of them. Like you can always slow down and smell the roses, and I could learn, Italian if I wanted to, if
Yeah,
I prioritized it. So then all is
exactly.
not lost.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's the one thing you wish to pass down to your kids?
Hmm. Optimism, the sense of change is possible. I think you don't have to
Mm.
accept the current constructs. I love seeing the youth being so excited about making change around climate, gun control,
Mhm.
access to healthcare, equity,
Mhm.
empathy. I want them to know that it is possible as a generation. They've got the size, the intellect, the drive to make it happen. They don't need to follow the path trodden. And so I spend a lot of time in my academics and as a parent, just trying to reinforce it's all you can do it. And so that
Mhm.
optimism and that buoyancy, that real change, fundamental change, is within your grasp. You just have to kind of lean in and put the work in, but it's there. So
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. But thanks so much, Kim.
this has been great. I've really enjoyed the
Yeah.
conversation. Maybe next time we'll do it in person. But yeah,
Yeah.
I loved all the questions. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Dialogue's 10 by 20 interview series, where we ask 10 questions in 20 minutes to profile international leaders working at the intersection of people, technology, and society. That's all for today's episode. Like and subscribe below to get notified for our upcoming interviews. Follow us on Instagram at dialogue_co.